Welcome to Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolf. Today I have Boo Trundle. She's the author of the one-of-a-kind, The Daughtership. Not only is she a writer, but she is also an artist and performer whose work has appeared across various platforms. She has released 3 albums of original music with Big Deal Records, so you can check those out as well. And she lives in New Jersey. So The Daughtership is her first novel. Although the book is itself a fiction, the book is a very powerful healing book that deals with ancestral healing and inner child work. So thank you, Boo, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So before we start talking about your one-of-a-kind book, I would love to ask what led you to publish a book, your debut novel, at age 56?
A lot of hard work. 3 decades of trying to get a book published. Yeah, I always wanted to be a writer, and I'm a multidisciplinary artist, so it's easy for me to distract myself. If I'm not getting successful in one medium, I go over and try another. So I've done a lot of different things. I was a singer-songwriter in my 20s, and then I started really getting serious about fiction in my 30s. I did, stand-up comedy and storytelling in my 40s, and finally got my novel published in my 50s. So yeah, I've been getting busy.
The stand-up comedy, that one's surprising. I don't think I could ever do that. I laugh at my own jokes.
It's very important to laugh at your own jokes. If you don't, who will? I entertain myself all the time. So yeah, that's a great trait. The stand-up comedy was a kind of a offshoot of doing storytelling on stage, which is more connected to writing. Have you ever heard of The Moth?
No.
Well, The Moth is a storytelling platform that is popular on NPR. I think they have like a weekly show on NPR, and it is one example, but people get up on stage and tell personal, first person, true stories from their lives, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and it's just better if it's funny. So by getting up and telling stories, I realized if I was funny, I would entertain the audience better. So that's how I got into stand-up comedy. And actually, stand-up comedy is really, really fun when you're doing it. I know it looks terrifying from the audience, but when you're up on stage, it is just such a high. It's really fun.
That is so
I know
neat.
it looks really scary though. And it's not for everyone. Like you have to like being on stage, but I do. So
That's awesome. I don't think I could ever do stand-up comedy. Part
never
of it is
say
I'm just
never.
not funny.
Well, yeah, that is a problem. Oh,
I'm one
so
of
when
those.
you said you make yourself laugh, you mean you're the only person that you make laugh?
Well, no, usually I'm laughing so hard no one can understand what I'm saying. Like I'll be like try to tell a joke and I'm laughing too hard, and then they're laughing because I'm laughing, not because the joke is funny.
Well,
But
that's one way to do it. It's a strategy.
true, yeah. Well, anyway, you stated that Daughtership is like a unicorn. So it's an inventive, one-of-kind work of literary fiction, is how it was described. What makes it so unique?
Well, the plot, I have been told, it's hard to describe it without sounding like I'm bragging. Like when you said like, well, you said your book is a unicorn, there's a part of me that's like, oh my gosh, I'm off bragging again. But I kind of have to brag because like it's kind of like laughing at your jokes. Like if I don't call myself brilliant, nobody else will. So yeah, it's kind of like that. But I will go ahead and brag about the book. I do think it's very unique and inventive because it is propulsive. Like the plot, I don't want to call it's not a traditional plot. The book has its own way of moving forward. And I have had friends and people I don't know who have just seen the reviews on Amazon or Goodreads say they couldn't put it down. So it is a page turner, but its plot is really being generated by the internal experience of the character rather than the external situation that she's in. And the internal experience that she's having is based on these inner children, these parts of herself that she left behind in her childhood. So really the story is happening because of what's happening to them, and they're trapped on a submarine, which is dysfunctional, not working, like at the bottom of the ocean. And so it's this fantastical plot line that makes the other plot line, which is very typical, just a woman living with her family, struggling with her marriage, struggling with her internal experience. That's what makes the book go forward. So in that sense, it's a very unique book, and it's also put together differently. It kind of teaches you how to read it as you're reading it. So it has its own language, it has its own rules. But I do think when you play the game by those rules, it does work. But as a reader, you really have to just kind of let go and let the book do its thing and not expect it to be like any other book. I mean, it's not a choose your own adventure or anything, but it's kind of got its own thing going.
I get that. So what were some of the biggest drawbacks of writing a book that is different than most anything else out there?
Oh, the drawbacks? No drawbacks. All good. It's all positive. Just always wonderful. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, well, the drawback, I guess, is getting people to read it because people tend to want to read books that are like books they've already read. So it takes someone who's up for a reading adventure to pick it up. And then, also you kind of have to you have to have faith in the book to keep going in the very beginning because it is so different. I'm not going to call it experimental because it's not. I mean, it very like when I think of experimental fiction, I think of books that are boring and that are hard to read. It's not hard to read and it's not boring. It's just different.
What were some of the perks of having it be so unique?
Well, I could have done it any other way. I think that the perks of having it be so unique is I do think that's why it got published. I've been trying to get a book published for a long time, and I don't think my previous novels, this is the fourth novel that I've tried to get published. I don't think my previous novels completely succeeded because I was trying to follow the rules. I was trying to write the way everybody else does. And I don't think that is how I experience reality. I think I experience reality way more, I mean, more like the character in the novel, and that my sort of consciousness or intelligence is way more multidimensional, fractured, colorful, and piecemeal than other people. And so I can't really write a novel the same way. And once I freed myself and let myself write a novel that really does reflect the way that I experience reality, which is slightly dissociated and from all different angles all the time, it was more true to me. And that's why I got it published. I mean, I think that's why it reads well and why it seems alive, because it's more authentic
I think that's
to
so
me.
important in a book is for it to be authentic. And that's one thing I hear a lot of authors say is that we need to stop following the rules perfectly because not always the rules are perfect for every book. I think the authenticity is what needs to be there. If the authenticity is there, then it's going to read well. And that's what I believe anyway.
I think so
So
too, but it can take a lifetime to find your voice. I mean, it really can. I mean, it can take a lifetime just on an interpersonal way, or just in terms of just living in your life. It can take a lifetime to find out who you really are and how you are at best in the world. And so finding the way that you're best on the written page is just a parallel of that. And it can take a long time and a lot of work, a lot of hard work.
especially if you've experienced a lot of trauma early on and didn't ever have that sense of identity that you found. So while
Yes,
writing,
exactly. It is about identity. I mean, identity and also subjectivity, so like first you have to be like, I had to, for me, and I had to get to a place mentally and emotionally where I had a firm little piece of ground to stand on from which to have this subjective position to write a good, long, cohesive novel. Um, Even so, it's really pieced together from lots of different points of view. So I don't think I'll ever be the person that can completely be integrated and subjective and like, this is me and this is what I see and this is what I'm going to tell you. It's the novel's coming from lots of different directions, but the story is unified at least. And that does take sort of a solid identity. And like I said, it took me a long time to get there. I don't even know if I'm really there yet, but enough.
so while writing your novel, what were some ways that helped you bring your work to life so it would be more relatable?
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, that's an interesting question because at first I was thinking, oh, those are two different things. Bringing the novel to life and then also it being relatable. At first I thought, oh, those are just so different, but actually you're right. Those are connected. If the novel is relatable, then it really comes to life for the reader. And the way that I did that probably just relates to what I was saying before. I just practice a lot. And I've been writing since I was a kid, really, but I wrote my first novel in college. And so I've just been using the tools, the tools are words and images and themes and dialogue and character and plot, all the tools you're working with as a writer, I've been using them and practicing with them hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, like my whole adult life. And at some point, I figured out a way to use those tools to express my inner experience. It just took a lot of practice.
And I know that you had said that this book has a lot about what's happening on the inside and also ancestral healing. How
Mm-hmm.
did you intertwine the healing elements, specifically with ancestral healing, with the fiction narrative?
The ancestral healing part of the book was a fold in, really. It was a different project I'd been working on. I grew up in Virginia, and my mother's, how do I say this? My mother's great grandfather. So my grandfather's grandfather was a soldier in the Civil War fighting for the South. And so when I was growing up, there was all this hero worship going on around him, and there was very little critical analysis about the fact that he was fighting for the South, fighting to preserve slavery, fighting to preserve the Southern way of life. And so there was this weird disconnect, once I figured out who he was and what he was doing, between, like, there was a big photo of him and he was like the hero of our family and like the famous ancestor, and then what he was actually doing. um and I ended up, I live in New York. I don't live in the South, but even now, like in Richmond where my siblings live, there's a sort of Southern Gothic obsession with the Civil War. So I had done all this research around it and done all this writing around it, and had never figured out where to put it. And so what I ended up doing in the novel is that there's a character named Dead Girl, and Dead Girl is represents all of the women that came before Catherine, the main character, in her family line, like her mother, her grandmother, her great grandmother, the women in the family, all the way back to the Civil War. And so the Civil War is where I started. And I used real people in my family. So I did research on first the wife of this Confederate general, and then her daughter, and then her daughter, all the way back to my mom. And so that part of it is fairly autobiographical, except I made everything up. I didn't have any documents. I do actually have some letters that one of them wrote, but I was mostly just making stuff up based on my family history. So, but the idea in the novel is that these characters are helping the main character. So Catherine's getting guidance and help and compassion and emotional data from her grandmothers, and whenever they come in as this character named Dead Girl, who, and it could be any one of them, but it's basically like a ghost. So that's how that works.
And how did you choose the elements of inner child work in your book? How did you weave that in?
Yeah, it's kind of like, let's say we have Catherine, who's the main character. Her above her super conscious is Dead Girl, but her subconscious is her inner child. So they're both influencing her choices and her decisions, and also obviously directing and enacting or enabling her healing. So it's almost the inner children were represented by the submarine. So there's a whole part of the novel that takes place, like I said, on this decrepit, dysfunctional, I like using that word just because everybody always uses that, dysfunctional family. It's a dysfunctional submarine. And the idea is the only way that Catherine, the main character, is going to survive is if this submarine can start working again. And the little inner children live on the submarine. So the little inner children, there's three of them. They represent parts of Catherine that she left behind in her childhood. Basically, they're all holding different memories for her that she doesn't want to face. And if she can't face them, the submarine can't rise up in the water, and these little children will not survive. And if these little children don't survive, ultimately, Catherine's life is going to implode. So the tension is, will she face them and face the truth in time to save her own life?
So you actually have a dynamic of, her up here, but then the submarine. Are they two different storylines, or do you
Yeah.
interweave them?
Well,
Okay.
they're two different storylines, but they start to intersect, and that's when the novel climaxes. Is like, that's how it works. So they're going along, and then they're getting closer, and then then you see how they interact, and that's I don't want to go too into it because it's a bit of a
Right.
spoil. I don't want to spoil it. There's there's some surprises that happen around the way these two storylines intersect.
Awesome. So one of the things that you mentioned before we met was that you enjoy writing into taboo, saying the unsayable in order to know the unknowable. What did you mean by that?
Well, this is sort of I call it Me Too too, like METOOTOO. Like the second part of Me Too is, to me, is sexual abuse within a family, because that is sort of the ghost that's haunting Catherine. And there's been a lot of denial and cover up, and not just from her family members, but her to herself, about some things that happened to her when she was a little girl. And so the taboo there obviously is sexual abuse within a family. I feel like when Me Too happened, a lot of people came forth and talked about sexual abuse at the workplace, or date rape, or sexual abuse in college, or, sexual assault. But a lot of sexual assault happens within the family. And I still think that's a very taboo topic. I know it is, because I mean, even when I was marketing the novel, I don't talk about it very often. I don't, I feel like if I'd put it in the title or put it on, like, the back of the book, people would just put it down. I think people are really scared of it. It's a scary topic, but it's really common. And and since the book's come out, I've done some book groups, and I now, it's not like I didn't know it, but it's really kind of epidemic, but it's not something people like to talk about.
It's very interesting that, when I saw the Me Too too, I was very curious what you meant by that. And I really, as soon as you said it, I'm like, yeah, they didn't really talk about that. And the funny thing is I know a lot of people who have had, who would be part of the Me Too, except for most of them would never speak forward, because I think there's an extra shame element when it's a family member that isn't there when, like you can say, well, that was someone else when you're saying that just the Me Too. Whereas I think sometimes, like we identify with the person, we love that person sometimes on some level at least. And so then there adds that shame of, I love this person and yet they did this to me. And so I don't love them, but there's just that, I guess, that broken love there.
Yes, I agree. And I also think, so shame is a huge, huge theme in the novel. And there's a metaphor I use in the novel where oil is sort of the symbol for shame. And so there's all this stuff in the book about, like I told you, how the book kind of teaches you how to read it. Like, as you read it, eventually you start to recognize that when I say oil, I mean shame. And there's a lot of ways that oil and shame are similar. I did some playful Instagram posts about that, but the metaphor really is, that it's so deep down. Like, oil is so deep down in the earth, and shame is so far deep down. And especially when it's something like this with a family memory or a family member, it's so deep down that, it kind of comes, you have to kind of drill down to get it. It comes up, and then you have to drill back down, and it doesn't want to stay up. And, and also, if this concept of, like, what's true, what really happened, if it's inside of a family, it starts getting retold and repressed and suppressed and twisted and blamed on the victim so early that it's almost impossible to get to the truth. It's almost impossible. And so you have to let go of, like, what you think the truth is. In order to heal, you have to try to heal it, whether it's true or not. And that's a very bizarre situation to be in. And that's a big theme in my novel. Like, that's one of the things that the three kids in the submarine are fighting about constantly, is like, what happened? What is true? Who gets to say it? Who doesn't get to say it? That's what the inner children are. They are at battle over, because that's a problem.
I know I interviewed somebody who had that experience with her grandfather, and she had written a memoir. And so she was actually on my other podcast, Strength, Love, and Healing. And the one thing I think that also happens when it is a family member is people take sides. And so, like, if you do speak out, you're not just losing that relationship with the person who hurt you, you're losing relationships with other people who do not believe you. Or, and she just talked about how it took her parents and her sisters to really understand the level of hurt that her grandfather had caused to her, about 20 years before they really understood. And that was after she told them. That was not
Right.
20 years from when it happened, 20 years after she told them. And her grandmother had passed away believing her grandfather. And so she never had that, like, where her grandmother believed her. and her grandfather was never
Right.
prosecuted either. And I think that happens a lot with family is people take sides. And then
Well,
they don't.
also, I mean, who's going to prosecute their own grandfather? I mean, that's, that's a tough one right there. Um, yeah. So what I was going to say about that, it kind of circles back to the unicorn conversation. What I was trying to do with the daughtership, part of what I was trying to do is reinvent storytelling so that I could tell a story about childhood trauma that replicates the actual, to my experience of the actual of trying to convince yourself of something that you don't want to believe. And if you don't even want to believe it, how are you going to convince other people? It's something you don't even want to talk about. How are you going to talk to other people about it? Except that you have to, or you will die. I mean, it's a life or death kind of thing. And so you have to, so it takes a lot of courage. And so one of the things that one of the ways I describe my book, in this idea of like unicorn, like what's so different about it is that I think that most storylines go in a horizontal line. Like, there's the beginning, the middle, and the end, and then the story runs along this like horizontal line. But my story is vertical. It's like to me, like I tried to make the storytelling replicate the oil drill, right? So like an oil drill goes down, it comes up, it goes down, it comes up. So my story kind of goes down into the truth, comes back up, and then it kind of moves along, and then it tries again, and it goes down into the truth, and it comes back up, and maybe brings up little pieces every time, but never the whole story. Because to me, that is really the way memory works. It doesn't really look like a straight line. You might remember something here and something there. And especially when it's something you don't want to be true, it takes a lot of courage to keep going down and keep coming up, so that's why I use that metaphor. And it's very hard for me to write about that kind of in internal experience without being experimental, and because it's not a straight line. It's not a straight line.
I don't think anybody's experience really is a straight line. Because like you think everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden you like hit the dirt because you got tripped on something that happened like 20 years ago that you thought you
Yeah.
were healed from.
Yeah.
And then you realize, you know what, there's a lot more healing that needs to happen. And I think everybody encounters something like that, even if it's, some people have more of those tripping, more of those oil drillings than others. But anyway,
I think you're right. And I think I'm writing a new novel right now. It's called The Emotional Future, and my preoccupations are very similar in this new book. It's not about the same thing, and there's no submarine, thank goodness. It's not nautical, thank goodness. I'm so like don't want to write about anything about the ocean, but it is the same. I'm doing the same kind of exercise where I'm trying to manipulate the storytelling tools. I think we're all really familiar with what they are. Like I said earlier, there's dialogue, there's characters. We need characters. We need dialogue. We need some kind of a forward-moving plot mechanism, but it doesn't have to be a plot. It just has to be a plot mechanism, something to keep us turn the pages, because nobody wants to suffer through a book that they don't want to turn the page. We need setting. We need these basic elements, but I also think that there's no reason why we can't mess them up and move them around and use them differently in order to try to replicate the way we really do experience the world. Because especially now, because everybody's always binge watching TV, and we all know what a story is supposed to look like. We all know story, and a lot of the stories that are being told are the same story over and over again. So I think we're all intelligent enough to have it kind of mixed up and thrown around, kind of like an abstract painting. So that's really what I'm trying to do in order to get a little closer to what is really true, at least for me. So it's almost like the equivalent of like an abstract painting, except that it hopefully makes sense. Sometimes abstract paintings, you're just like, what the heck is that? It's not the best. It's not a great analogy, but like in the sense that an abstract painting is using paint and canvas and the same tools that a realistic painting would use, but it's not quite the same, because I think most people would prefer a realistic painting.
so you had actually written several books before that you had tried to get published, but never were able. Now that you've published this book, do you think you'll revisit any of those and modify them? Or do you think that they're just
Oh yeah, that's what
your
I'm doing
collection?
actually. That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah, my new book, it's basically a rewrite of a book I didn't get published. It used to be called When the Children Were Babies, and now I'm calling it The Emotional Future. I'm using a lot of the elements, like the setting, the characters, but I'm mixing them up and trying to explode it all. And I'm trying to understand the relationship between emotions and the human body and story, So there's a lot of and the story that I'm writing about is war. So it's like war, the human body, the emotions, and then all this like realistic fiction that it's all resting on. It's pretty hard. I don't know if it's gonna work. I mean,
Well,
I
good
think it's
luck
gonna
with it.
work. Yeah.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Well,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Good luck. That's kind of like good luck, like good luck with that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. But before you go, I do want to ask the question that I ask everybody. And what
Oh,
is one piece of advice that you would give to a not yet published author?
let's see. Oh, one piece of advice for a not yet published author. I'm gonna go with get out there and mix it up with other writers. Go to book events, go to conferences, go to workshops. Don't stay home alone, because a lot of the publishing part is relationships. The writing part is be home alone at your desk, but the publishing part, you have to leave your house. So go on, get your shoes on, get out of your house. I know it's not easy.
Especially for people who like to write, because we like to be at
Yeah,
home.
I know. It's really too bad that it works that way, but I think that's how I ended up getting published, just like getting out there and mixing it up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Boo, for joining me today. I would also like to thank my listeners for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy my interview with Amanda Quick, who wrote The Sex Trafficker's Wife, a memoir about healing. Again, I had the privilege of chatting with Boo Trundle. She's the author of The Daughtership. You can find the links in the show notes along with her socials and website. Thank you again very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in Authors Alcove, the Writing Corner. We hope today's discussion has inspired and informed your writing journey. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review to help us reach more writers like you. And remember, we are brought to you today by the letter S, as in Scrivener, your partner in crafting and organizing your story. Again, if you would like to support me through Patreon, that is always appreciated. You can find both of these links in our show notes. You can also listen to us at Authors Alcove, the healing place, where authors share about their books on healing and recovery, or Authors Alcove, the reading nook, where we talk about fantasy, sci-fi, and the occasional horror. Until next time, keep writing, keep creating, and we'll see you back in the writing.